All right, so we're in a sermon series on the book of Proverbs, and Proverbs is a book of wisdom, a book of wise sayings. And it's really about practical, everyday matters of life. Compared to other books of the Bible, where God is speaking, and a lot of times there's absolute commands in there, this is more observations of this is how God has set up the world, and in general, this is how things work. It doesn't mean it's absolutes. There's a proverb in there that says, train the child in the way they should go, and in the end they will not depart from it. Well, there are times where parents have done, all kinds of things to invest well and raise a child well, and then there's things that happen. There's exceptions to the rule. But in general, an investment of a parent in a certain way leads to positive results. So there's a lot of these general sayings that if you think about it, it's like, yeah, this is true. It's not so much about whether or not we have the right information. It's more about, are we able to apply it skillfully? And part of what Proverbs says is that wisdom and knowledge is there's a moral aspect to it. The motto of the book is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, or later, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If you take God out of the equation, then it's hard to live skillfully because God created life. God's the one who makes things work like they're supposed to work. And so we need to acknowledge God. And part of it isn't so much for me that I don't know what to do. Part of it for me is whether or not I will do it. And we can start to have influences come in our subconscious, and naturally, we just take a little step off the path. Little step off the path. Little step off the path. And over the course of a lifetime, we could be living what Proverbs would call being a fool or a mocker or a scorner. Compared to little steps on the path, over time, you have lived a wise life. You have lived a life that results in much good. You have become the kind of person who naturally does what is good and right and fair, and who people want to be around and bless. So a couple weeks ago, Judd Nelson gave the sermon, and I thought he had something brilliant. Scripture talks about that sometimes these words in the Bible are like milk. They're like for anybody, even new people to the way of Jesus. It just makes sense. But then there's other parts that as you get older, it's like, oh, this makes even more sense, or oh, I didn't even think about this. And then the Bible calls that meat. And Judd said that Proverbs is the rock candy of the Bible. And I think that's really true because so much of the Proverbs is just this little saying that you can't just read and then go on to the next one and read and go on to the next one. It's more like, I have to think about that. I have to let that soak in if it's going to matter in my life. So I thought he did just a masterful job of taking one verse and really soaking it. Maybe brought in a few others, really soaking. And when I'm looking at Proverbs for myself most of the time, that's how I would read Proverbs. I wouldn't just try to plow through, especially chapters 10 through 31. I would just take a little saying, and I might try to keep it with me through the day. Keep it with me through a week, through a season of life. Try to carry a proverb with me. Now, what I'm going to do today, though, is quite different than that. What I wanted to do, much of Proverbs doesn't seem like it's connected to, it's like skipping around. It says something about family relationship here, and then like all these verses, and then it says something again. And then all these verses, and it says something again. So what I have done, I've been looking at how do you get ahead in life? Proverbs talks a lot about how do you get ahead in life, or how do you fall behind in life? And related to money as well. So here's what I did. I went through and I typed out all the Proverbs that I thought had to do with that. 6 pages worth. Just went through and I typed them all out. And then I reorganized them into categories. So I could say, okay, these are the things that Proverbs is teaching us. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these. But what I do want to do is share with you at first some of the things that I think Proverbs says about money or about getting ahead in life or falling behind in life. And then I'm going to zero in on 2 at the end that I think is important for us today and read some of the Proverbs that reinforce those points. So, first couple of points. One, Proverbs says there are benefits to wealth. There's benefits to having a lot of money. It's a good thing. Our wealth is like a fortified city. It's a place that keeps us secure and safe compared to, a proverb says, the poverty of the poor is where they're ruins. They're ruins. It's like a broken down city because they don't have what they need to establish life. Proverbs says money can get you friends. People tend to, when you have money, especially if you're willing to share it, people want to be around you. They will be careful not to offend you. And it says, if you don't have a lot of money, even your family doesn't always stick up for you a lot of times. Now, again, that's not what Proverbs is saying is how it should be. Proverbs is just saying that if you observe that in life, and if you watch an important and influential or a person with a lot of money, and you watch the way people are around them, compared to sometimes people don't even see someone who doesn't have it. They don't even see someone important's in the room. They don't see other people who have less. And Proverbs says if you are the one who has a lot of money and gives gifts, it can help you with relationships. There are many benefits to having money. If you are always looking for, I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills, I don't know how I'm going to get through, I don't know how I'm going to have food, if you're in that kind of place of instability, that's a hard way to live, and it's a hard way to bless other people or to have good relationships compared to if you have something. But Proverbs also says there are limitations to wealth. Here's one that says, rich and poor have this in common, the Lord is maker of them all. Rich and poor have this in common, the Lord is maker of them all, and guess what? He's not impressed by a lot of money. He's got everything he needs. He is not impressed by how much money you have or how much influence you have. That doesn't impress him. And another proverb just talks about, let's see, what does it say? I'm going to try these 3 weeks to use notes, and then I think I'm never going to do it again because it's like I'm moving and then stop. Okay. Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath. When we die, it doesn't matter how much stuff we have, doesn't matter what's in our bank account or not bank account. That is not what's going to be important when we die, when we are sitting before the judge. Money doesn't matter. It has its limitations. It also has its limitations about our reputation and our honor. You can have a lot of money, but people may not like you. Your money is not going to be what makes them ultimately like you. And then a couple other proverbs that says, better a small serving of vegetables with love than a fattened calf with hatred. So better that you're eating just normal, simple food than all you can eat, the favorite foods you have, if the people you're with, there's not love. Compared to, vice versa, another one that says, better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. If you have a lot of money, but your relationships are all screwed up, you're still not going to be happy. Chasing after money, going after money, there are limitations to that. Okay. I probably went on too long. I'll go quicker with these next ones. Okay, God hates dishonest gain. I mean, over and over again, if you're going for the wrong motives, if you're going the wrong means, it talks about scales, because in the economy back then, a lot of things were measured out on scales, and people would try to rig those up. If you're taking advantage of people, if you're doing things dishonestly, without integrity, God does not like that, and he sees it. And we can think we've gotten away with something, but he sees it. Also, and this may be, of all of my sections, this may be the biggest one. God cares about the poor. Over and over again in Proverbs, he sees it. He sees what happens with the poor. And he says, you rip off the poor, you take advantage of the poor, you better believe that someday God's going to do something about it. You better believe it. Might not be today, might not be next week, might not be next year, might not even be on this lifetime, but God cares about the poor. I mean, he has passion for the people that most of us overlook. He has passion, and he will make things right if we take advantage of it. Conversely, whoever lends to the poor, whoever gives to the poor, it says gives to the Lord. Because he cares so much about the poor, he identifies so much with the poor that when we do good to the poor, when we do good to those in need, when we do good to those who are having trouble bringing stability in life, he sees it, he is proud, he is happy, he will pay it back. And I am so grateful that the Well Ministry is in town. And I'm thankful for those of you who have served there, who work there, who volunteer there, trying to help what is it that people need to take steps towards stability in a way that builds relationships, in a way that honors them and doesn't label people who are different than us. It is good for both of us. When we are coming together, the scripture is so clear about wrong attitudes about the poor. And so that is something that Proverbs, I didn't expect this so much in Proverbs. I see it in other places, but in Proverbs, God is really passionate about the poor. Now, in addition to, if we go to the next slide, in addition to how much he cares about the poor, there are all kinds of Proverbs about being generous, even when it's not just about the poor, just being a generous person in general. And the person who is generous and refreshes others, it says, will be refreshed. And a person, it says in one of the Proverbs, who is stingy, who won't sell the grain when it's time when people are needing it, won't sell it, hoards the grain, get cursed. Because everybody's like, man, you have good, you could do good for me, but no, you're not going to do it. You got to make sure you have enough. You got to make sure you first. People curse you. But with the one who's like, yeah, I'm willing to do it, even if it's, not best. Oh, go ahead and take this. Go ahead and borrow this. Let me help you out with this. You get blessed. By God, but also by people, because people just like people who are sharing, who are generous, who give. You are blessed. Generosity is a good thing, Proverbs says. Avoid debt. Avoid getting into debt that is beyond what you can pay. It talks about giving things for security. Well, you take this and I'll pay you back. And then when we are in debt to the extreme of what we can afford, then any little thing that happens, and it's like we're on stilts. So people can make tons and tons of money here compared to these people who don't make very much money. And yet they spend and borrow to a degree where they're barely making it, barely able to make their payments because they've stretched themselves to a max compared to people who said, whatever we can afford, we're going to do a little bit less. Having a house payment, if one can figure out a way to get a house payment, makes sense to go into debt that way, to the degree that otherwise I might just be giving rent and I'm getting no equity for it. But in general, as much as is possible, debt is a way, if we don't pay down debt, it is a way to get further and further behind when we're paying interest. So the Proverb says, you want to get ahead, minimize debt. And that's just common sense when we think about it, but very difficult to do. Two more, and then we'll get into our main two. Good planning is crucial. Don't be in a hurry. Make sure you bring in other advisors. Good planning is crucial. Do things ahead of time so that you're ready when it's the right time. Don't put everything off and procrastinate. Good planning is crucial. And then trusting God is crucial. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge or submit to him, and he will direct your paths. That's Proverbs 3. That's one of the most famous verses in Proverbs. Commit your ways to the Lord. Now, that last part is what we normally hear in church. We talk a lot about how we don't do things in our own strength, how we need to trust God, how we need God's help. Lots of that of bringing it's not about our work. How do we trust God? How do we commit to God? That's what you'll hear most often probably from this stage. But I want to talk about two other things. I want to give two other examples today. Here's what Proverbs says a lot, and this is what I think would help us get ahead in life in various ways. And here's one of the messages. Don't be a sluggard. Don't be a sluggard. Don't become a sluggard through little choices over life. Don't be lazy. Proverbs says over, I'm not going to go through all of the sluggard passages, but I'm going to go over some of them. So here's Proverbs 26, verses 14 and 15. They say, as a door turns on its hinges, so a sluggard turns on his bed. A sluggard buries his hand in the dish. He is too lazy to bring it back to his mouth. And laying in bed, I should get up. Just in a little bit. One more snooze button. And I mean, you're talking quite a picture when you get to the point like you're so lazy, like, that's a lot of work to get that up here. Now, Proverbs has a tendency to paint a picture of the exaggeration. But what its message is, if you go on this path, this is what it leads to. It leads to this much. Where even something that, of course, you should do because it's good for you, you don't do. Another proverb that I'm not going to read, it talks about it's like smoke in a person's eyes when you send a sluggard to them. So I got someone they worked with somebody for a while and they were on their crew together and the person but the person had a connection and so they got rehired. And the whole crew, when this person came back, was like, because they knew they would have to do the extra work. This would be more difficult than that. We don't want to be that person. So a sluggard, someone who doesn't do their part, who isn't willing to work diligently, we're like smoke in people's eyes when we're like that. We don't want to be that. Let's go to Proverbs 24:30 through 34. Here's something that is said a couple different times, some of these thoughts. I went past the field of a sluggard, past the vineyard of someone who has no sense. Thorns had come up everywhere, the ground was covered with weeds, and the stone wall was in ruins. I applied my heart to what I observed. This is something about Proverbs. Proverbs, when they see something, you're saying, now, I apply my heart to it. What can I learn from this? How might I be like this? What should I do to avoid this? I applied my heart to what I observed and learned a lesson from what I saw. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. A little sleep, a little slumber. Too much sleep when we should be working. Now, we live in a sleep-deprived country. Most of us don't get as much sleep as we need. But I don't think for most of us it's because of how hard we work. So here's a proverb that verbatim comes up in multiple times. This next one is from 28, verse 19. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies will have their fill of poverty. I think that it's less about, we work so hard and so we don't get enough sleep. I think it's more of we are looking at screens so much instead of sleeping in sort of half-conscious stage. Occasional productivity, but often interrupted. And a lot of it is it's not real stuff. We're just watching the YouTube videos to amuse ourselves to death. There's a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. That's what's happening in our country. We're on social media and hours go by and we didn't even realize it. And so we feel like we don't have very much time. We feel like we don't get enough sleep. But so much of it is just because gaming, video gaming, taking up huge amounts of time. I'm not here to say, that's bad. But if we want to live a life where we get ahead, we should probably say, how much time should I spend watching this stuff? How much time should I spend, and just is 3 hours a day, watching screens 3 hours, and I realize there's work and it's hard to interrupt, but that is part of our problem. That's where we need wisdom. We do have to be in front of screens a lot. But what if 21 hours a week of it is just wasted time? It's not working hard. It's not connecting deeply with people. Although social media is a way to connect with people. That's why we need wisdom. What of it is good? What of it is bad? This isn't a judgmental thing. This is, I'm going to apply my heart to wisdom, to what I observe. And I just find that if I say, like, well, how much TV do I think I should watch in a week? And then I look at, like, how much TV I did watch this week, then I might think, I guess I need to make changes. Because every evening, the couch looks so good to me. And now I can watch whatever I want because everything's on TV. But then once I do that one evening, that looks really good the next evening and the next evening. But how, in the Hebrew world, that's what the Old Testament is, Hebrew people, their day started the night before. When God created the world, he said there was evening and there was morning the first day. Like, he starts in the evening. So your day started last night. How your day is going to be is set up by how you go to bed and when you go to bed. Now, I mean, it was a beautiful race night. That's different. I'm talking about the normal flow of life. What is wise? A couple more on the sluggard. The craving, 21 verses 25 through 26. The craving of a sluggard will be the death of him because his hands refuse to work. All day long he craves more, but the righteous give without sparing. One of the things, I just read it last night. I don't even know where I read it, but someone said every day when I wake up, I could think of, like, how can I enjoy myself or how could I make a positive impact? Those choices are before me. It makes it hard to figure out what to do. Because if all I'm about is how do I enjoy myself, how do I get pleasure, I probably minimize how do I make a good impact. How do I, and this is fed because people want to sell their products and their services. This, how do I enjoy myself, is like fed as the highest thing instead of how do I serve, how do I grow, how do I develop, how do I get skills, how do I work harder. That is less so. So finally, chapter 26 through 13, a characteristic of a sluggard is always coming up with an excuse. So a sluggard says, there's a lion in the road, a fierce lion roaming the streets. There's multiple ones where a sluggard's like, well, in the public square, there's a lion out there. I guess I can't do anything. The lion? Well, there might be a lion. What is it that becomes your excuse? Well, tomorrow. Well, next week. Well, as soon as this starts. And it always gets pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. Meanwhile, every day, we're gaining or losing ground in life. And if we're always pushing it back. So a wise person, now there is so much that we could do, right? A wise person has to take time to reflect and say, okay, what is the most important thing for me in this season? What do I want to make sure happens? Because I might not be able to make everything happen I want to. But I tend to get 3 months down the road, and the things that I thought were most important, they aren't happening still. Okay, there's the negative side. What's the positive side? Proverbs would say, be the wife of noble character. I realize that's sort of a male-female thing. And this clearly, the end of Proverbs. There's a lot of kind of heroes in Proverbs. Wisdom itself is personified as a woman in Proverbs. Solomon is the wise king. There's other kings. But the Proverbs 31 talks about this wife of noble character. And as I read it, it's talking about the things that are appropriate, meet the day. Like their culture, their times, agriculture was different, the political system was different with kings. But it's talking about this wife of noble character, but when I read it, I realize most of this could apply male or female. One of the things that's most true of the wife of noble character, she works hard. We should work hard. Just a few Proverbs, 10 verse 4, lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. 12:24, diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. Here's one several of you will like. 12:27, the lazy do not roast any game, but the diligent feed on the riches of the hunt. The author of Proverbs was not vegan. Nothing wrong with vegan, I'm just saying. So, hunting, good thing, be diligent about it. Like, Proverbs isn't just talking about the job that you do when you clock in and clock out. Proverbs is talking about working in life, in the areas, all the different areas of life. And finally, 14 verse 23, all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Some of us like to talk a lot about what we're going to do or what we could do or what we should do or if we would do if other people would do their thing instead of work. We like to complain instead of how can we find a solution. Work hard. I think that the most violated, maybe not the most violated, but the most, nothing's wrong with it of all the 10 commandments is the Sabbath day. The commandment about the Sabbath day is that one day a week we should not work. We should cease from work. We should rest to focus on the Lord and just to enjoy life. But it also says 6 days you should work. Besides when you're sleeping, 6/7 of the time should be toward work. And I think we violate both. I don't think we rest very well. We don't rest intentionally. We don't recreate in ways that really are restorative. And also, we don't work hard. I think a lot of us think we work harder than we do. And Proverbs is saying working hard is a good thing. Let me read about this wife as my last reading. Proverbs 31, 13 through 20. I'll see what you bring up on the screen. That way I'm not confused. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers the field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff, I don't even know what that is, and grasps the spindle with her fingers. Even though I do most of the sewing at our house. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. So here's what I'd like us to do to close our time. The last minutes here. I'd like us to do two things moving forward. Well, one, I'd like you to consider cleaning up garbage. And seriously, I'm good. I think it would be a blessing to the racing community. It would help some people out in the community. It would bring in money that would help for our mission trip. But it would be work. But here are the two things. One is, can you think of someone who works hard that you know, and this week honor them for it? At the end of Proverbs 31, there's this person who does all these things, and sometimes when people do all this kind of work, we take it for granted. We just, they're the kind of person that they must really like to do that kind of stuff. They just do a good job, and so they're that kind of person, and that's great. But we don't acknowledge it. And so would you think of something? And now again, when I'm thinking of work, you could think of jobs or at your job or that kind of deal. But who works hard in the home, making things happen? I'm thinking about Kiwanis or Rotary or Lions Club. I'm thinking about all the coaching kinds of things that happen on the side, or organizations that are run, or for music, or things in the community, or for hospice. Who works hard? Who works hard at things? And would you honor them? I did a ride along this weekend with the lieutenant sheriff. And man, what they do every day. What the ER room does every day. And does anyone thank them? And so is there someone in your life that this week you could say, I see what you do and I appreciate it. Write a note, send a text, Facebook, whatever. Somehow communicate, I appreciate that you work hard. Many of you, I observe, work hard. You do good beyond just what you have to do. You are making a difference. And I so appreciate that. Now, the other thing, I'll have the worship team come up, and I'll have our prayer ministers kind of go to their spots. The other thing I want us to do to end is I want you to think, is there a way that you would like your work to be blessed? I've read this in several different places, so I don't know the original source. But something says we should pray like it all depends on God. Pray like the only way anything happens is if God does something. But we should work like it all depends on us. And I think one of the things that we could do today is just ask for God to bless our work. Be specific, some aspect of our work. Bless me. It could have nothing to do with our job. This is an area of my life I want God's blessing on it because it feels blocked or because I'm nervous going in. School kinds of things as well. Going into a new year. I want blessing. And what you would do if you go over to any of these people here, as we're closing up during the last song, is just ask them and they will anoint you with oil either on your forehead or on one or both of your hands. You don't have to share much. This is supposed to be a short time of just like, I'd like God's blessing on this. Maybe you find I'm not a very good worker. I'm piddling away a ton of time. I want God to help me become a better worker. I want God to bless my workplace or this part of the community that I'm involved in. The reason for oil, there's a biblical reason. I'm not going to get into that. The blessing can leave with you. You will feel that the blessing leaves with you. It goes to wherever you're going, day by day and week by week in this next season of life. I don't see a reason why anyone would not want that. So I encourage you, we're going to leave a little time of instrumental at any point during that. Get up, receive your blessing, be thinking about who you want to bless because of their hard work. Then throughout the song as we worship, the same thing. You can go get blessing if you want. You can just worship or you can think about who is it that I want to bless this week because they work hard. And God loves it when we work hard for the right reasons. Let's pray. Thank you, God, for hard workers among us. Thank you for those who invest into their families or their neighborhoods, into different organizations, community events. Thank you. Thank you for those who put their life on the line, their hearts on the line, day after day. Thank you. Thank you for whatever abilities we have that can be purposeful. Thank you that all of us who are here have the ability to make a difference. Thank you. Now, would you, in these final moments together, would you deposit someone we should bless today and how we could bless them in this coming week? And would you show us if there's something, some way you want to bless us, part of our work, part of what we offer. I have this strong sense that up in the atmosphere are all kinds of blessings that you want to drop into people this morning. So we ask that you would do that out of your grace.